to podcast number 5, right?
Woo.
Oh man, we're really growing and building and transitioning into a bigger podcast group. Okay, I'm Dan Goldberg. That's Javaska Thomas.
Hello.
He's the producer. I'm the whatever and the host, and I'm the whatever. Today, as in the past weeks, we're doing 2 parts. The first part is our soaring to success part, and we're going to talk about transitioning in business. Whatever that transition looks like, I'm going to give you some examples and so forth. The second part is soaring to enlightenment, and we're going to do a segment on transitioning in your life and what that means. So stick with us, and by the way, if you have any questions, please post your questions below so that we can address them in the next Ask Dan segment. I think I've covered that pretty well, don't you think?
Very
okay.
well.
So let's begin the soaring to success and transitioning.
Let's transition to our...
There you go. Transitioning portion in the transitioning and soaring to success. It's interesting because business is, if you're in a growth pattern, which I hope you all are or will be, there is a constant transition. It's constant. It's growth. It's or it's retraction, but it's transition. And what you have to do is have a plan, a transitioning plan, which for a lot of people isn't evident at the beginning. They may do a business plan, and it may have an understanding of where they're going, what they want to do. They'll have a vision. They'll have a mission. They'll have financials. But then things happen.
Right.
Okay.
Are you talking about like the strategic planning?
Yeah, it's strategic, but it's also, it is strategic.
Okay.
But it's the general business concept and plan.
Okay.
Okay. Not unlike what we did in some of our classes.
Right.
And if you don't know, Javaska was a student of mine at Penn State in the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Intercollege minor at Abington. So here's one of the things, or not one, we're going to lead with one, that happens in business. All of a sudden, you start your little business, and it begins to grow. Oh, yeah.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Who would have thunk that in their mind? And all of a sudden you go, oh, geez, what do I do now? Now, most business people, most entrepreneurs, they think about growth. They think about that next transition. But unfortunately, they really don't plan for it. So it's like, and I always refer to 4 Eyes. I refer to Goldberg, Strunk & Levy, which was my consulting firm for about 14 years, and even Atron Oil and Gas, which was my exploration and production oil and gas company in Russia. But anyway, each case, the same things happened. As it grew, I and the team had to understand where we go from here. So when 4 Eyes became busy and it was just me, I started November 1st, back in the sometime
around that time,
circa
20th century.
20th century, and one of our wars. It was during one of our wars, but anyway, civil. I think.
Oh,
Civil
I was
War.
thinking revolutionary. But
Right.
Anyway,
It could have been the Revolutionary War because it was a revolution, what we did. And anyway, I started November 1st. And then on April 8th, and I think we've talked about this before, they wrote a big article in the Philadelphia Bulletin, which was a major newspaper then, the Sunday paper. And I had to ask my brother to leave what he was doing and my friend to leave what he was doing so that they could help me. There was no transition plan because I was just this one guy helping people and figured that I would grow periodically and eventually need a second person. But it exploded overnight. So I had to go into, to use a term from Tesla, ludicrous zone, and
Ludicrous mode.
Ludicrous
Nice.
mode. That's it. Ludicrous mode, and get a little ludicrous and say, "Help me!" and come on, let's go. And that's what happened. But realizing that every time we expanded, there was a transition. How do I go into this city? How do I go into that city? What's my transition team, my war team, as I mentioned before, who can go into a city and make this transition smooth to help the person who is managing that store in the new city and had the promise of, and it always came to fruition, to be the district manager in that city as we grew.
Mm-hmm.
So at the beginning, there was no transition plan. But after the first ludicrous mode,
Right.
I realized that I had to have a transition for everything that was going to happen, that I foresaw and my team began to foresee. And the same thing happened with Goldberg, Strunk, and Levy, which was a pretty successful consulting firm in Philadelphia, but we had international clients. So, and here's a good example of a transition from Four Eyes to Goldberg, Strunk, and Levy. Okay. And again, I might have used this as an example, but let's put it in the context of how you transition from owning a sizable company, which was now a national, international company.
No big deal.
To, right, to doing nothing, right, to retiring, sort of, and then to starting another business. It was very interesting because after I sold Four Eyes, a friend of mine saw me on the street and said, "What's wrong with you?"
Oh, right.
I told you that story.
Yeah.
I might have told the story before, but let's put it in a transition context. And I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "You don't look right." I said, "Well, what are you doing?" She said to me. I said, "Well, really nothing. I've sold the company and I'm not doing anything." She said, "Well, start another company, will you?" because you look horrible. And I said, "Okay, I guess that's a warning, right?" So that's what I did, and I started Goldberg, Strunk, and Levy because everybody was asking me how to help them build a business and so forth, and I figured I could charge.
Right.
But as that business began to grow, it was originally professional management and marketing. That had a smaller transition, a slower transition than Four Eyes, because Four Eyes exploded overnight after being in business for February, March, for 5 months. Goldberg, Strunk, and Levy did it gradually, but at the same time, it was still pretty impactful. And as I grew, I looked for certain types of people to fill in the team. And that was, well, I'm doing more public relations. It was a management, marketing, advertising, public relations firm.
Okay.
So in order for me to keep growing, because most of my clients were asking me for business coaching and consulting, and how I built my business, which was mostly through public relations, some advertising, certainly that's marketing and management. So I said, well, we're doing a lot more PR. I could use another PR person. Okay. And that's what we did. And when we brought in a PR person, a former journalist for the Philadelphia Bulletin, for USA Today and other media outlets. And in those days, newspapers were the thing. There was no big social media. We could take on more PR clients. And then as that began to blossom, and we sort of were positioning a lot more clients and some pretty big clients, we realized we could use another journalist / advertising person. So we brought in someone who was a publisher and had been the editorial head of Philadelphia Magazine. He was basically the manager of Philadelphia Magazine, editorial manager, and so it was all step by step, purposely done. And once we did that, we could add more clients because of that. And then we realized, well, we need more administrative people.
Mm-hmm.
So we add more administrative people. And before we knew it, that little one-person shop had 8 or 10 people working in it. But it was done in a very calculated and aware manner. It's like, okay, we can mine this portion of the business further. We can get more clients by asking our existing clients to refer us because we did such a great job for them.
That makes sense.
And then that was a transition. But what we didn't do was ask for more business before we were ready.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's important.
That's important. Or at least until I had the plan in place.
Right. Like one of the worst things to do is underdeliver.
Right.
In business.
You don't want to underdeliver. It's the same way with, as we went into different cities, how do you transition from a store into a successful store?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was done with PR. And when we knew that the PR was coming, you'll pardon my voice. I got
sound fine. Hold on, let me.
I have a little raspiness to my voice. I think I ate too much pepper about a week ago, and it still hasn't gone away. But anyway, or whatever it is. But once we knew what we were going to do, and I was very well aware of public relations. Get aware of public relations. I know that Gary Vaynerchuk is publishing a new book called Crushing It. His first one, Crush It, was pretty cool. You check it out, okay? He's really, look him up too in his podcast. Once we knew that was coming, we would send the war team to that city. Chicago, a bunch of people would go to that city. I may have mentioned this before, so that when the PR came out in the Chicago Tribune,
right,
or the Chicago Magazine, we didn't underdeliver. Exactly. We over-delivered. Once you over-deliver, then you have to plan for, well, we're over-delivering, so maybe we'll see 100 people this week, but we know that within 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to see 300 people. Mm-hmm. So we better load up on good people and put the war team in there to interview people, to get people, and then little by little bring this person back, be the next person back, or to a different city. So this may be relevant to your business or may not be because you're not expanding to different cities. But the premise of it all should be relevant to you. Don't underdeliver. Don't blow the opportunity of getting good PR and good advertising and good marketing by under-delivering, and always find people who complement you. Mm-hmm. If you think that you know everything, you don't. So you want people who are stronger in areas where you're not, or even if you're strong in an area, you got to pick which area you're going to concentrate on and say, listen, I know I'm good in this area, but so's Bobby over here, and so Sheila over there. Let's bring them in. Let them do that so I can concentrate on working on my business rather than in my business.
Exactly.
Now, eventually, you're going to have to do that. But initially, you got to work both, okay? So the transition is as much mental, and we'll get into the personal side. That's a whole different thing, as it is strategic. You can have all the strategy in the world, but if you can't pull it off, if it's just going to sit on a three-ring binder on your shelf, you're screwed, okay? You will underdeliver. You will have a chaotic situation, and before you know it, your business will be gone.
Mm-hmm.
The transition is how do you transition? I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a landscaper. You know, that's one of my favorite businesses because I've spoken at their conferences and so forth, and I use it a lot as examples. And you know that the climate's changing. I mean, no matter what anybody says, the climate's changing.
What are you talking about?
I know.
Isn't the Earth flat?
The Earth is flat, but that's okay because it goes up and down with the sun, and it has a big aluminum.
Mm-hmm. And we're surrounded by a bubble.
And we have that aluminum foil reflector
right
at both ends of the flatness, so it makes it hot or cold depending on the table it's sitting on. So, okay. So the thing is that if the climate is changing, how do you as a landscaper deal with that? Now, that may seem trivial, but I guarantee you there are landscapers out there in Chicago, in Boston, in Milwaukee, in northern climates, in Philadelphia, where the summer was always mow, blow, plant, build, construct, do all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you had, I guess, from March, end of March, April, to October, November, when you're putting in, fall cleanup, you're doing spring cleanup, you have decorative plants, cabbages and stuff like that you can do in the fall, and you have other decorative plants in the spring and summer. But most landscapers, or a lot of landscapers, supplemented the winter months by plowing snow.
That makes sense.
Okay, that's what they did. So they had one part was plow, the other part was plant, basically to use more P's. But what do you do now? In Philly, we just had a snowstorm. We had snow last night. It was what, an inch or two? It's gone. Look, you can still see some of it. You can still see some back here.
We're going to get 3 to 6 feet.
Everyone
get milk.
Right. That's basically what it was. Okay.
And now it's
it was 3 to 6 inches, they said. Okay. 1 to 3 here, north a little more, 3 to 6. But look, we knew that it was going to be 42 or 43 degrees. So it's all gone by now. And by the middle of the week, it's going to be 75.
No way.
Yeah. 72,
I'm
70.
happy.
It's going to be like, and then it'll be in the 60s and it'll be in the 50s. You can look on your phone, look at the weather. This is the middle of February. This is ridiculous. But it's been this way for years.
Yeah.
Okay, for 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah.
It used to be January, February, December, early March. You'd have cold, and you'd have 18 inches of snow.
Cold
at a pop. Okay. It's not that way anymore.
Mm-mm.
So all those landscapers that used to plow, they've lost all that income.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? You extend your season. You do indoor landscaping.
You start thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
You start adding cleaning services.
You do
car
all kinds of
services.
Yeah, you do. That's what you do. That's what you do.
Right.
You say, if it's warm this winter, we're going to do construction in the back. We're going to build you a new deck. We're going to do interior landscaping. There are people that do interior landscaping, but now exterior landscapers may think about, hey, we have all these commercial buildings. They should have plants.
Mm-hmm.
You're in your house, okay? You love plants. You don't have the time to water them, take care of them, sculpt them in the case of bonsai or whatever it is. We'll do that for you. And if you're not doing that and you're a landscaper in areas where you used to plow, shame on you. Because you got to think differently. You got to think creatively. You got to build it to the next level, or your winners will be, unfortunately, your crews will either go home, or if they're here, you may have to pay them or have part-time if you don't want to lose people. And it's weird. So you got to think differently. It's the same thing with marketing. If you didn't transition from doing just magazines and newspapers
Oh dear.
into social media, and you're a marketing firm, you're dead. You're an old marketing firm. Okay, if you don't understand all the different modes from Snapchat to Instagram to Facebook to Twitter and anything else that's coming on board, Facebook, I said Facebook, and the advertising techniques of both, and the demographics and how to look at them, and the monetization and YouTube and all this other stuff, which is what you're watching us on now. Shame on you.
Mm-hmm.
So the transition is understanding trends, going to conventions, industry conventions, okay, trade shows, stuff like that, but having a vision in place of how you're going to take your business and all the potential roadblocks, stumbling blocks, and opportunities, then, you're not keeping up with the Joneses, okay? If you're starting a landscape business now, I bet you're thinking differently than somebody who started a landscape business 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, okay? Because climate change seems to be pretty rapid to me. What do I know? But I'm just a college professor. I don't know, but whatever. So think about that as you transition, but ask me questions below about your business and say, Dan, I'm going through this. Dan, I'm going through that. I have this potential this. Somebody who worked for me just opened up a yoga studio down the block, and she worked for me for 10 years. And what do I do
Spicy.
now? Yeah, I know that does happen. Opticians, I had people open up, but fortunately they didn't open up down the block. But what's your strategy to make that transition not be something that will damage your business? Will you lose some business? You may, but how are you going to pick it up? What are you going to do to compensate for that? There are certain cases where you're going to look at it and go, I better think about a different business. I'm going to have to do something else. And it's sort of like if you're a hardware store or a stationery store.
Oh dear.
And you were a stationery store back in the 70s and 80s, and all of a sudden Staples and Office Max came around. What do?
No, not even that. Jeff Bezos came around.
Yeah, and Jeff Bezos. Okay.
Chopped everyone.
It chopped everyone off. And that's a good one. So what do? You know that you're going to be out of business. How do you transition yourself into something else? It's the same way if Walmart is coming into your neighborhood, although Amazon's eating that up too, and Walmart is trying to transition to more of an online store.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I have my own opinions about Walmart.
They're being reactionary rather than proactive.
Exactly. And for me, this is just my opinion. I would never shop at a Walmart because they are just, to me, an unethical company. You may love them, I get it, but the way they treat their vendors and employees, I'm not a fan.
I agree.
So I'd rather spend my money somewhere else. But you got to figure that. You may be sitting pretty today, but tomorrow somebody may come out with an app or a store down the block and change things. So you have to always monitor the competition,
especially in this environment.
We have transitioned as an economy, as a retail economy, as a service economy, at warp speed almost.
Exponential.
Yeah, in the last 15 years.
Yep.
Okay, and it's the same way with automobiles. If you're, coming out with the most efficient combustion engine, okay, I get it. There'll be people buying it, but in the next 10 years, I would venture to say,
I want my Tesla.
Yeah, you're gonna see electric cars. That's what's going to happen. Volvo said that I think they're not even going to produce combustion engine cars in the year 2020.
Smart.
And they're just going to do electric. And Hyundai is coming out by 2020 with a whole line of electric cars. And so then you have to think, how do I transition to electric cars and at the same time keep my electric bills lower, right? Because now you're going to be plugging in your car. Well, you think about the initial investment of a turbine, a windmill. You put
installing
it in your house.
a windmill.
Yeah. You can do that. They have them
Fair.
for your home, or
panel.
solar panels, or a combination of both. So you're almost off the grid. How do you position yourself for that? And how do you position an entire fleet of cars for your company to electric? Well, you install charging stations. That's what you do.
There's a whole industry in this.
There is an industry in it.
There's a
Yes.
full industry.
And actually, in one of my classes, we're working on that, all alternative energy and sustainability with the township. So think about what the future holds, how you're going to live in that future. And if you're my age, which is, I'm 28, if you're right? Yeah, or something with numbers
I
in
thought
it.
you were 25.
I was. But if you're not like listening to the younger generation, there's something wrong with you. I mean, they're the next group. They're the ones driving the train now, and you got to understand what gets them going. You got to look at the apps. You got to look at the businesses that they frequent, how they frequent them, online, in person, okay, in store, bricks and mortar or not. And it's the same way with consulting, how you're going to address consulting for your business, whether you bring in consultants or you are a consultant. And sometimes consultants use consultants. I have been a consultant I have been a life coach and a business coach to
that's amazing.
To consulting firms for years. I had done that, and it's interesting because they want a different view. They want a different view. And how do I do this? How do I break this mold I'm in? And we get into patterns. I get it. We get into patterns, and it's tough to break. As I may have mentioned before, we learn from our mistakes. The jewel in that is to make sure that you're not learning your mistakes so well you keep doing it. So you got to learn how to break away from your mistakes. Right. So anyway, I hope I've given you some insights into transitioning your business, but I would love to see some questions below.
Post them
here on YouTube or on Instagram or on Facebook. Message me on Twitter. Twitter is at Danny Goldberg. Instagram is Dan.Goldberg, correct? Facebook is Dan Goldberg FB, okay, as in Dan Goldberg Facebook, okay? And YouTube is capital D, A-N, capital G, the number 4, the letter capital U, and the number 2. So it's Dan G for YouTube. Okay, so talk about transition. Let's talk about transitioning from our business side to our personal side.
Speaking of transition.
I'm going to transition my position here and relax.
All my transitions.
And what transition my transition is in, and tell you that one of the things we go through is, we go through our business transitions all the time. I'm going through a transition right now, personally, academically. I'll give you more information on that in another podcast. But I am going through a transition personally. It's all good. It's all good. But I look at it from the level of how will my transition affect and impact other people. And what I don't want to do is leave a legacy of, well, he really screwed us, or he just up and left, okay, or
My
did
goodness.
this, right, or he left us in the middle of something, or he gave us all these things to do that were meaningless ultimately. I want it to be, he really helped me through up until the end, and he really did what he said he would do, and he didn't drop the ball. And that's just, I'm using he because I'm a he, but I mean, just she
Insert
didn't do
pronoun
it
there.
right, exactly. And that's what you want to do from a personal perspective. Even if you were transitioning from one position to another, from one relationship to another, okay, because we do that. And like everyone else, I guess, who's my age, 28 or 25, one of those.
Exactly.
I've had a number of relationships in my life, and I am pleased to say that every one of them remains a friend of mine, because my mission is to help people and be kind to people and be caring with people, so that even when I'm out of their life on a constant basis, they don't have negative thoughts about me. And that's important to me, because they know that they can always call me if they need help. And if you're going through a transition and somebody is abusing you, mentally, physically, verbally, that's a different story. My suggestion is that you gently leave, and it's easier said than done. So that's only a suggestion. If you're going through therapy, speak with your therapist. Do what's legally correct and all that other stuff. But life transitions are difficult, but they don't have to be. And one of the things you have to do, and I talked about this in a prior podcast, is look at how you impact everyone else around you, and what you want, again, your legacy to be. And if you don't care, I'm going to use a term I used earlier: shame on you. Shame on you. That's selfish. It's egotistical. It could border on sociopathic, and other things. And you got to realize that we only have each other. So one of the things I really work at is separating myself from myself, and my physical self, and my spiritual, for lack of a better term. I'd rather say my mental, my cognitive self. Okay, it's a better way of putting it. And
please elaborate.
Okay,
please.
If you get my book, which I showed you in the last one, called Soaring to Enlightenment, I really discuss that. And it's being able to view from a distance how you impact people when you walk into a room. It's sort of like that 30,000 foot view, okay? 30,000 feet up or 5,000 feet up. And you probably heard that before, but if not, this is not a sales pitch. Get a hold of my book. It's not expensive, or buy it online for $2 or $3, whatever it is. The Kindle version or the Nook version. And read about it, because our energy has an impact. And if you can look at what you're doing, because we're always in a constant transition. We transition, like this morning, I transitioned from grading all my interns that send me logs, my engineering student that sends me
many.
Things, so many. You have no idea how many there are, but it's a lot. To doing this podcast with Javaska. So I had to lay out my time frame, and I do this, as I mentioned before, this crazy hour and 15 minutes to hour and a half workout every day. So that means I have to go to sleep a little earlier, all kinds of stuff, but it's all prioritization so that I am awake, I feel energized and so forth. I don't like to feel dragging, and I try to stay away from that as much as possible. So a personal transition is really how you handle the changes in life. Because time is a non-renewable resource. You never get back the time that was just passed. Okay, you don't know the time you have in the future. It could end just like that. And in this country, sadly, we have people doing crazy things to people all the time, but it's that way around the world. Mm-hmm. And as you know, we just experienced something recently in Florida, but there's wars all over the world, and things can end now. Okay, so all you have is this moment, and to transition to this moment is constant because every second or every moment is a new moment. So you have to keep in mind, how do I optimize my time? How do I optimize now? How do I transition from worrying about, and this is another thing that's a repetitive part of my life and my coaching and training and teaching, to get over that negative feeling about worry, regret, jealousy, and all those other things, because they eat away at your life. They make your transitions much harder. They hold you back. It's like, you've all seen pictures of people walking with a stone, that's strapped to their back. And
yeah.
It's like trying to go to the next place with 1,000-pound weight on your back. It's hard enough just to walk. I mean, how do you get over there if you can't even make the first step because you're so impacted by negativity that you can't think beyond it?
Yeah.
So the transition in life is getting rid of the trash, the negative stuff.
I was just thinking that. I was thinking the hardest thing that, makes people not be able to transition is the fact that they can't let go of what they're transitioning from.
Correct.
So they're going into this new situation, this new moment with the experiences of the past, and it's not necessarily the same thing that's going to happen. It's just they're making an assumption based off of their experiences.
Right. That's a great way of putting it. I mean, people go into relationships. You've heard.
I was sort of talking about that. But
yeah. It's like people just go into a rebound.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They find somebody and they do it, and they're making the same mistakes. Take some time to reflect on what you did and why that relationship didn't work out, and say, I'm not going to do that again. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to look for the same person I just broke up with, just in a different being. But it's basically the same person. They may look the same. They may act the same. They may have the same physical characteristics. But maybe you have to break yourself of that pattern. We get comfortable in patterns. And normally what tends to happen is you break up with that person too.
Yeah.
Because you're still in that pattern. And it's the same way with, well, I was going to say businesses, but I want to get away from business because we talked about in the first segment. Yeah. But when you leave a relationship, leave it. Always look at it, cherish the time you spent in it, but it's time to move on. And if you can't move on, you better get some help. You better get some psychological help, some coaching help, whatever you deem necessary, so that you can get out of the past. The past is meaningless except for history. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. That's true, but you can't go back. No matter what you try to do, you cannot go back. There's no time machine to take you back 100 years.
Yet.
Doesn't exist. I hate to say it, it doesn't exist. Okay, no matter what the movies say,
30 years.
No matter what Hollywood says, that's just the way it is. So, don't look for the past. Don't wallow in the past. We only have a certain amount of time to be on this earth. Enjoy now. Don't get stuck in a place where you're in quicksand. It's the La Brea tar pits in L.A.
Oh my goodness.
You can't walk in the La Brea tar pits. There's woolly mammoths in there and everything else. You can't walk in that muck. Don't get stuck in the muck.
Don't get stuck in the muck.
That's a shirt.
That's amazing.
Or a hat.
Check.
So don't get stuck in the muck. Don't use that.
Coming
I
soon.
did trademark. Okay.
TM.
Don't get stuck in the muck. So that's the deal. I guess it's the easiest way of explaining how to transition without the burden of the past on you. Some people, if you get fired from your job, you got fired from your job. I mean, that's just the way it is, man. I mean, it's like, so what are you going to do? You're going to hate the person who fires you? Well,
no. You got to adapt.
You got to
survive.
Yeah, and you don't waste all that negative energy. And the person may be a jerk that fired you, or who fired you. The person who fired you might be a jerk, but that's their problem. If you sort of get involved with thinking about that person on a constant basis, they're still controlling you, even though they don't even know it or even care about it. So get rid of that and just go. So you got fired. So what? People get fired. That's it. Move to the next thing. Start your own business. Go to another place.
But you have skills, though, if you get fired.
Yeah,
you have experience. You have skills. You can always transition while
and
waste your time,
Right. And a lot of times, it's the insecurity of... I'm not saying every time. You may be a total mess at your job and deserve to get fired. And then you got to look at yourself and say, I got fired, but I deserve to get fired. And that may be hard for you to deal with, okay? Or you may have been a total mess in a relationship and say, she broke up with me, he broke up with me, I'm so devastated. Well, you deserved it because you acted like an idiot, okay? So look at that and say, I acted like an idiot.
Yeah, you got to be honest with yourself.
Yeah, you got to be. Otherwise, you'll keep doing it, as I said earlier. So make the transition a realization of, okay, it happened. How do I move forward? I have to live in the now. There's only now. I can't waste time worrying about the past. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to other people. Be a gentle person, but be strong, and wish the best for everybody. But realize that this is your life, and you have to keep transitioning to the next portion of it, whatever that may be. If you have questions, post them below. Whether you're watching this on YouTube or part of it on Instagram or Facebook, or I put something on Twitter, just do that. And all those little handles will be on the...
they'll be in the description.
Put
them up on the screen wherever they need to be.
That's right. So I want you to do that. I want you to enjoy yourselves. Have an easy transition to whatever you're doing in your business, your personal life. And spread love and peace and kindness, but be strong.
And don't get stuck in the muck.
Don't get stuck in the muck.
I think that's what our title is.
Yeah. Don't get stuck in the muck. That's what we're going to do.
Don't get stuck in the muck of business, in life.
Transition. But don't get stuck in the muck. We will speak with you soon. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.